Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne. Thank you very much for finding me and welcome to my channel. I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without any equipment. So without greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers, just me and them inside or outside, or I don't bother because they're too tricky. So if that sounds like your conditions, plant lovers of the world, hit subscribe. I post every Friday and my ramblings are that of an amateur. Which brings us cunningly and neatly into this. Look, I'm going to have to hold it this way because it's growing at an odd angle, but look at that flower. Look at the curlicues on those petals and sepals. It is the most amazing flower, and it is or was a Miltassia. Now, unfortunately, Miltassias are all now called Bratonias. Not a name I love, but I understand because essentially they're a hybrid between Miltonias and Brassias. And once they were called Miltassias, but now they are called Bratonias. But in my heart, they will always be Miltassias. I find it a bit more poetic than Bratonia. Anyway, enough of that. I've made quite a few Miltassia videos, or Bratonia videos, because I have one called Lavender Kiss Lavender Taffy, which is a very vigorous plant and flowers amazingly, and it's incredible. And Miltassias seem to like Melbourne's climate, and I thought, there you go, easy, let's get some more. But there actually aren't that many varieties available in Australia, so I've struggled to find some that look significantly different to Lavender Kiss Lavender Taffy. And this, I guess, in colour palette perhaps doesn't, but in the form and the shape of the flower, it certainly is. Now, the name is a little confusing. So it's called here Miltassia Bolero, and this is how I bought it. I bought it a year ago as a division at the plant sale of an orchid group, which is why, plant lovers, you should join your local orchid groups because they have great plant sales. Now, I've never seen this before, so there you go. Great place to shop. Now, whether Bolero actually is its name, there is an orchid called Estrellita Bolero and Red Robe. Anyway, there's quite a few Miltassias. I couldn't really guarantee that Bolero is the variety name. But anyway, this is most likely a combination deluxe between Brassia maculata and Miltonia regnellii. Now, the Miltonia is a cooler grower, the Brassia is a warmer grower. However, as I've said before, Miltassias or Bratonias do seem to like my Melbourne conditions. Now, I grow all of these outdoors all year under cover, and I'll show you now where this one is lurking. It is on a fence and it is protected overhead by polycarbonate, so it's not rained on, but it's quite breezy and quite bright in direct light. But most importantly, it is taking our winter nighttime minimums, which is the key. So we don't get to freezing here in the inner city of Melbourne, 0 degrees centigrade, 32 Fahrenheit. We can get down to about 3 to 5 degrees centigrade at night on the coolest evenings. 38, 40, 41 degrees Fahrenheit around there. So getting close to cool and cold, but not freezing. And Miltassias just seem to love it. And I think, well, it's that Miltonia blood. Now, I have struggled a bit with Miltonias because I feel they need to be quite moist and humid without being wet all the time. And I find that easier to achieve outdoors, but then you have the winter nighttime minimums to contend with. However, all the Miltonias that I have outside are doing really well. So I think it's that Miltonia blood that enables Miltassia or Bratonia to do really well in my climate. So this baby lives outside all year. Now, the other interesting thing about this one, perhaps more than Lavender Kiss, Lavender Taffy, is the growth pattern of it. Now, Miltonia is sort of a rhizomus, and they really run along the surface of a pot, which can make them quite difficult to pot and to contain because they do want to run. And if you want to get a big specimen plant, you're going to need a wide, shallow pan, and bonsai dishes are great for that. And I feel that this is wanting to do the same thing, not quite as pronounced, but quite similar. And Brassias have a reasonably similar growth pattern as well, so can be tricky to pot and to manage. But Lavender Kiss, Lavender Taffy seems to have much more of an oncidium growth pattern, so much more upright and able to be contained in a regular pot. So I bought this a year ago as a division, and it has put on growth for me. And as with many orchids, it is the new growth that then produces the flower spike from the axis of the leaf towards the bottom here. And this has given me one spike with 2 flowers. Now, I'm just wondering, I have had other new growth, but only one flower. I think perhaps it's just getting used to me, getting used to my conditions. So maybe next year we might get a little bit more action from this one. But nonetheless, I am very pleased. But I think, let's talk about the flower. The thing that has astounded me are these flowers. Goodness. I mean, just look at the curlicues on the petals and the sepals. These mad things, they're like sort of a jester's hat. I've never quite seen anything quite so curly. Look at that. And then these little spiky tufty bits. Beautiful flower, and it's a lovely sort of speckled mauve, which I love. I live for mauve and lilac. A beautiful flower. Now, Miltonias often smell of coriander or cilantro. This one has no fragrance whatsoever, but who cares? Look at that flower. So care-wise, basic instructions, then bright indirect light. This is quite high up, so it's getting quite a lot of air movement. I do find that Miltassias and Miltonias and Bratonias do like, it's hard to say that they want more moisture because you don't want to overwater it and keep it wet, but it is, I find for me, that they like to be on the moister side. So don't let them dry out too much between waterings, even in winter. So I do water these in winter. I try and do it on a brighter, warmer, breezier day so that any moisture is going to evaporate really quickly. But I do really quite drench it, and it's Miltonia ancestral cousins, so they do get water all year, and I find they just do better. Obviously in winter you're not doing it as often, and in the warmer season you are watering it more, but not an orchid I like to dry out because I have had terrible concertina leaves from Miltonias from not watering them enough. And the mix that it's in is a pretty standard free draining orchid mix. So it's a bit of medium bark with a little bit of sphagnum moss, not too much, but that's just to retain some moisture in the mix, and some perlite to keep it nice and light and airy. And I have mycorrhizal fungi in there to help promote vigorous root growth and assist the plant in drawing out water and nutrients from the soil, and a bit of slow release fertilizer. And I fertilize all my orchids with a slow release fertilizer in spring. I'm about to do these now. And then throughout the growing season, when it's warmer, I'll give them a liquid fertilizer, maybe every third watering-ish, or a liquid tonic, which can take the form more of a seaweed-based solution, or even the runoff from worm farms, worm juice, which you dilute. So that's not a food, it is a tonic, and it's just full of wonderful biological goodness, which just acts as a bit of a tonic for your plant and helps it be its best self. So other than that, I just think this has got a few little scabby sheaths, which I just want to remove because it is hanging up and it's a little tricky to get to. So now that I've got it down, I just want to get rid of some of these bits and bobs. They always provide fantastic lurking spots for insects. And I think because I have this outside, really the only problem I ever have sort of insect-wise out there are munching and chewing things. So versions of caterpillars, slugs and snails. And the only way to really deal with that is to deal with slugs and snails and caterpillars. Now, caterpillars are tricky because, of course, we all want, well, A, butterflies and moths are often pollinators of orchids, and B, we need insects in the world because we're in an insect Armageddon at the moment, unfortunately. However, I don't want caterpillars to be munching on my orchid. So I do have actually fake little butterflies, little white butterflies on a stick, which is bizarre, but apparently cabbage white butterflies are territorial. So if they see this butterfly, which is a fake one, bobbing about on a wire in your orchidarium, it thinks, ah, this territory's been taken by another butterfly, I won't come. However, non-cabbage white butterflies might just think it's a free-for-all. Anyway, that's the only thing I really have to contend with, and it's tricky because I really don't want to kill caterpillars, but I do, or throw them over the fence if I find them on my orchids. So there we are, that is that one, and I'm just going to show you this Brassia just to give you a sense of where some of these flower shapes come from. Now look at this, isn't this fabulous? I made a video about this one. This, I bought it as Arda. Ada Keeliana, but it is now Brassia. But you can see those curlicues and those florid bits of this orchid, and you can really see how the hybridization has taken a lot of the elements from these species plants and sort of exaggerated them in the hybrids. So imagine the Miltonia flowers are much more open and like a Miltoniopsis, kind of pansy-like. The Brassias are much slimmer, much more elongated, and often called spider orchids, as you can see, because they've got very, very spidery parts to the flower. And the whole point of hybridization is to get more vigorous plants, different colors, fragrance, bigger flowers, different forms, etc. So you can see this is, well, I think it's lovely, but it's quite a plain thing, let's just say, whereas this has got all guns blazing in terms of its mad beauty. So there we are, Miltassias. If you're in a cooler climate like mine, Miltassia Bratonia is a great type of orchid to find because they are really easy to grow, really easy to flower, and can deal with those cooler temperatures. I will say though, they only bloom once a year. So on Oncidium hybrids, you can generally get multiple flowerings a year because each time a new growth matures, you should get flowers from hybridized Oncidium and Oncidium alliance orchids. But for me, and maybe it's different for you wherever you are, but Miltassias or Bratonias only flower once a year with each new flush of growth, like their Miltonia ancestor cousins and their Brassia ancestor cousins. Anyway, maybe you have a different experience. Maybe if you're in somewhere warmer and more humid, they might bloom multiply in the year. But for me, it is always about at this time of year, which is late winter, early spring. So there we are, plant lovers. Many thanks for joining me and Miltassia Bratonia Bolero, if that is the name. It could be Estrelita Bolero, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, it's a fabulous orchid, who really cares what it's called. But Miltassias are a great type to find, so I hope you've enjoyed this. I do post every week, so join me next Friday. Who knows what I'll be doing, but it'll be something amateurish and perhaps with a death involved. Oh, I have just deleted a whole lot of things from my orchid inventory, which didn't make it into this year, but never mind. That is part of the journey, isn't it? Learning and killing things as we go. I look forward very much to seeing you next week. I hope your orchids are doing what they should wherever you are, and I will see you next week.